Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 125 here. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. And this week I have 6 new LitRPG titles just for you folks at home. And that includes the Call of Carrethen, a LitRPG and GameLit novel in the Wellspring series, book number 1. Also, the Station Core, a Dungeon Core Epic Station Core's book number 1. And Warrior Academy, Tournament of Heroes, Part 2, Episode number 4. That's a long title. Then there's also Regicide, the Completionist Chronicles, book number 2. Also be reviewing War Aeternus 3, The Culling, and last but not least, to be Life Reset, EVP, or Environment versus Player, New Era Online, book number 2. So there we go, 6 new reviews for you folks coming up. But before we get into those reviews, we're going to, of course, go into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with a nice cover reveal from Blaze Corbin. Blaze Corbin is the author of the Delvers LLC series, Nora Hazard, and the Secret of the Old One series, all wonderful LitRPG series. He revealed the cover for a brand new LitRPG he's writing with Outspan Foster, who's the author of Slime Gods and Branded. And the title of the novel is going to be First Song. It is going to be a LitRPG story. The author has confirmed that. He's also confirmed that he's hoping to get this project finished and done and available by September of this year. He also mentioned in the same post on Facebook that he's looking to publish Nora Hazard book number 2 by August, and a secret project he's working on with William Moran sometime in October. So there you go. So those are his tentative plans. Don't hold him to too many dates, folks. He's a busy man. But he is working hard on several projects at once. So there we go. Okay, another LitRPG news. I, Ramon Mejia, and R.A. Mejia, did a interview with Game Reads by Sean Callahan. We did it a while ago, and they're just coming out now. The author wanted Sean wanted to get a bunch of these interviews banked, and so we could have a regular publishing schedule. You can come listen and watch me talk about LitRPG and the stuff I write with a link in the YouTube page in the show notes. There's also a Facebook page. I also might have talked about some funny, interesting stories beyond LitRPG, including one about me driving 1,000 miles for a single donut. So there you go. In other LitRPG news, we have, this one's fun. Some folks have been really interested in a project that I've been working on. We actually have it available now. It's the first episode of the LitRPG audiobook contest, LitRPG audiobook podcast, rather. It's available now. It's hosted by Ray. He's an audiobook fanatic. I basically do the production on it, which means editing it all together, sound stuff, getting it published on iTunes and Google Play and all those other good places, as well as our YouTube page for the Geek Blast podcast, YouTube LitRPG podcast page, and of course also on the Facebook page as well. Ray is doing the reviews. He's doing the recordings, and then he sends them to me. I do all the editing and stuff and the production stuff, and it's all sponsored by Sambu Theater. So good stuff there. Ray has full autonomy as far as what he's reviewing and what he's saying, so there's no outside influences there. I basically set up the format, and he does a good job, so go check it out. I think it's really enjoyable. Ray does a really good job as far as expressing his points of view, and he also does not have a problem with saying that he doesn't like something. So that's always something I think a lot of people who watch these kind of shows appreciate, not just hearing a bunch of good things all the time, but also, this one isn't awesome. And so it kind of forewarns them that there may be issues with that particular title if they choose. We're also including in this particular show a small sample of each audiobook, so that you as a listener or as a watcher can actually get a feel for what the narrator sounds like, what the story pacing sounds like in the audiobook format of those LitRPG titles. So there you go. So fun stuff there. Go check it out, of course. In other LitRPG news, Dakota Kraut's latest novel, Regicide, has come out. It's Regicide, the Completionist Chronicles, book number 2. We're reviewing it on the show this week, but it came out this week, and man, this novel hit it out of the park, I gotta say. On the novel's very first day, being out in the world on Amazon, It shot all the way up to the top 100 list, and it stuck around the 24 mark, 27 mark of all books on Amazon, and that's a lot of stuff. And it hit the number 1 spot in many categories as a bestseller. Days later, even today, it's still in the top 100. I think it's hanging around like 79, 80 right now on the top 100 list on Amazon. So congratulations, Dakota, for writing such a good novel and having such good success, man. I'm genuinely proud of you, buddy. So, yay. Okay. In other LitRPG news, this is a slightly sadder story. Michael Scott Earl is the author of over 65 books, including several LitRPG series. This week he was hit with a suspension hammer from Amazon, and it was very unexpected from everybody. The author himself was super surprised. As of the recording of this podcast, Amazon only shows his audiobooks currently available for purchase. None of his ebooks or the print copies of his novels are available. And again, that's 65. That's a catalog of 65 novels. Thousands of his fans, and he does have thousands. He has several Facebook pages and newsletters, and just looking at some of his fans' messages on his fan page are they're very up in arms about this, and as they should be. Their favorite authors kind of disappeared from the largest ebook seller in the world. And his fans are writing complaints and messages to Jeff Bezos and Amazon customer support to complain about their favorite author having his books removed. Fans have posted Amazon's responses to the questions on the author's reader page. Responses range from free ebook credits to assurances that the author hasn't actually been suspended, but that there's some content issue in his novels. All include some kind of statement saying that the issue will be sent up the investigation chain. The responses from the Jeff Bezos emails have had some basically one sentence responses of like, this issue will be amicably settled soon, which is kind of a canned response. Michael Scott Earl himself explained his position in a statement in this group. And again, I'm only talking about this with his permission. I've got nothing from Amazon, but I've sent a few emails. Other authors are scratching their heads. I wasn't stuffing, so the only other thing that could have caused it was paying click farms to push my books or formatting. I didn't pay for click farming, but maybe I was set up, and my formatting is the same as other authors. If they decide to ban me, I'm pretty much done. The other ebook distro sites don't have enough traffic to pay my bills, and Patreon is filled by traffic from people picking up books through Amazon, so I'd never be able to grow it past the people that are in this group. Even the best paid authors on Patreon don't make a living wage. TLDR version, I'm not sure what that means, but he continues, please email jeff@amazon.com. You don't have to be rude or threatening. You can just say that you love my work and you really want me reinstated. From what people have said, my account is still up in the air, so you could help. So your help could ensure that I come back. And that's the end of his statement. Additionally, there is an online petition for both Michael Scott Earl and J.A. Cipriano to have their accounts reinstated. We have a link at the show notes for that, of course, as well. So the author is actually asking if you want to support him, just send an email to jeff@amazon.com or to Amazon customer support and let them know that you do not like this and that it's kind of an unexplained thing that's happened to the author because he doesn't understand why and why it's occurring, and neither do his fans. Like, he hasn't apparently been given a full explanation, which has been the case with other authors as well who've had their accounts suspended. The Amazon is just like, oh, you did a thing that might have done, had an issue, and there really is no explanation or way to kind of any kind of arbitration or any kind of way to like go or settle this. So it is unfortunate, but that is the situation. Of course, go right, Jeff at Amazon.com. Okay, that's it for LitRPG news. We have a few other titles that are out now that I haven't had a chance to read, including Loot Kingdom's Fallen Throne, written by Eden Red, Reed maybe. The high fantasy digital adventure that is the Fallen Throne book number 2 in that series. Also out now, that just came out today, is Monster Hunter NYC book number 2 by Harmon Cooper. So both of those are out currently. Okay, some new LitRPG audiobooks that have come out this week. Martyrs, Legends of the Great Savannah, book number 1 is out. You can check out the review we gave any of these novels in the audiobook section. We'll have links in the show notes for those. They got a score of 7.2 to 10 from us, though. Enjoyable. Also out right now as an audiobook is Temple of Sorrow, written by Carrie Summers. The narration is done by Annie Ellicott and Jeff Hayes. We gave it a score of 7 out of 10. It's a really What an enjoyable story. So go check both those out. They're out as audiobooks. And here's some stuff that's coming up in the near future in upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read up a bunch of titles and the release dates. So as I'm aware, we do have a couple new additions to this list. Reality Bender's book number 2 is going to be out on July 23rd. That title is called External Threat. On July 24th, this is a new addition to the list. James A. Hunter's latest LitRPG novel, written with Eden Hudson, is called Rogue Dungeon, a LitRPG adventure. The Rogue Dungeon book number 1. It'll be out on July the 24th. On July the 31st, Sleeping Player, Project Chrysalis book number 3 will be out. On August the 1st, Wizard Lord, Legends of Legends, a LitRPG fantasy. Wizard Lord book number 1 will be out. It describes itself as a LitRPG title. So it's there on the list. Also out on August the 1st will be The Curse of the Hurlig Ridge World Tree Online, the first dive. August the 7th will be Death March Euphoria Online, book number 1. August 24th, it will be Bitter, book number 4. So if you're a fan of that series, the 4th book will be out on August the 24th. There's a pre-order available. August the 30th, Raven Vex, book number 2 in the Binding book series. September 26th, Freehaven Online, the Lady Thunderlord into Hades. On October the 8th, it'll be Kingdom of the Dead, which is the NPC Paths book number 2 will be out. And on November 21st, Freehaven Online, Winter Dungeon Land. This is the 3rd book in that series. So there you go. That's all the stuff I know that's coming out in the near future. Focusing on authors, if you have something that you plan to release or you have a pre-order out for a little bit channel, send the information to me at feedback@geekbytespodcast.com or at litrpgpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to add it to our list of upcoming titles so that the fans can know that your work is coming up, even if you don't have a pre-order. There you go. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, folks, we have our first title, which is going to be Call of Carrethen, Wellspring book number 1, written by Stephen Rourke. It is 437 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Call of Carrethen, the world's first real virtual reality game powered by the Wellspring device, growing up broke in the sprawl, I knew I could never afford one. But then I won a contest, and the next thing I knew, I was diving into the most incredible world, living out my wildest fantasies. But now, I'm being held hostage with no ability to log out, and the penalty for in-game death, brain death. My soul will be lost forever in the electronic void. The world has been taken over by a black knight calling himself the Ripper. I don't know him, but he definitely knows me. He turned the entire server red and returned everyone to level 1, everyone but me. He gifted me 20 levels with one single deadly caveat. Anyone who manages to kill me gets a free ride home. I'm a marked man. In order to survive and to get back to my family, I have to level up and defeat the Ripper. But with more than half the server out to get me, that's not going to be easy. So there you go. That's the author's description of the novel. The novel blurb, full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review of the novel. I purchased the novel when it did become available, though, which is now. It actually just came out. This is... the story takes essentially the short outline premise of trapped in the game and die in the game, die in real life, and adds a bit of a twist. In addition to beating the big evil max level bad guy to get free, another way that one of the many players trapped can get out of the game is by killing the main character, Jack. To make it a challenge for the other players, they're all reset to level 1, and the main character is bumped up to level 20. This incorporates a race between the main character and the rest of the server to level up. It's a good motivation for everyone to continue risking their lives playing the game. I was personally just a little disappointed in the story of how little progress the main character makes when there's a 2-week time skip forward in the story. He's basically at the same level. I'm like, oh, and everyone else is kind of leveled up. Like that kind of makes that that level range kind of useless, but it's part of the story. I understand that the author had to give these other characters a chance to catch up, I guess. From there on, it's a story about how far the main character is willing to go, or how he's being pushed to kill other players to protect his friends, and the guild that has helped him out in the story. There are many discussions about the morality of the subject, of like murdering other players or like killing them if you think that they're going to die in real life. And while some people will find the main character's point of view to be a little bit whiny, I know I did, it's the challenge he has to overcome by the end of the story. That's like his big personality challenge, or his big thing to overcome in the story. On the game mechanics side, the author says he's based the story on the game mechanics on Asheron's Call. He even gives the game a nod in the story. There's loads of details about skills and how players can create truly unique builds. Most of this detail is front-loaded in the story, and it goes on, and as the story goes on, that variety and that detail sort of becomes a little more minimized as just the story shifts to like the player versus player and PK combat of the story. Crafting does happen in the story, but you don't get much detail since it's not the main character doing any of it. Combat in the novel is good, mostly. There are several fights with things feel fixed or wand wavy, and where the main character or his friends probably should have died, and they just didn't. But overall, the descriptions are well done, and there's a variety of combat scenes that can be interesting throughout the novel. A few of the things that I really enjoyed about the story: in a story where death is permanent, the author is not afraid to kill off characters. So don't be surprised if some of the characters you like end up dead in the story. In addition, the plot point where where a player can get free if they kill the main character, I thought it was actually a nice twist on an otherwise standard premise. The twist at the end of the story were foreshadowed very well, but they still came as kind of a neat surprise for me. The resolution was very satisfying. I liked it a lot. The game mechanics had good depth and principle, and I could imagine many of the builds were possible within this particular system. There's a running gag in the story where one character quotes movie lines constantly, and I thought it was a nice little pop culture reference, a good little nod, good personality trait for that particular character, so I enjoyed that as well. There are a few things that bothered me about the story. Again, combat got a little wand wavy sometimes. Like, there are several fights in the story where the main character and his group would be fighting other characters that are like 10 or 20 levels higher than, which sometimes mean that they're twice as high a level as the characters themselves. And then the main character just happens to use some particular magic spell and they just suddenly win. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but okay. It is what it is. The math of the system and those particular fights just doesn't make sense to me. And that's just a few of the fights. Crafting felt a little one wave again. Most game mechanics are set up that crafters make things that are just like a little bit better than they would get from loot drops, right? At that level. But here, the crafters seem to be able to make items that make players that are level 10 more powerful. So in other words, like if you're level 1, some crafter will make you something that you can use that's like level 11 or 12 or 13 or 14, whatever, but you're still level 1, you know what I mean? And so that kind of gap between power structures from items seemed odd to me. So there you go. And another thing kind of bothered me: there are no healers in this story, and it doesn't really make sense why, because there are healing powers. There's magic in the story, which is again, it's one of the things that kind of shifted from the Sword Art Online premise. And Sword Art Online, which is a very popular manga, anime story, one of the things that stopped people from like healing each other is the fact that there is no magic in that game world. So people had powers, they had like special abilities, but there is no magic system there, which means that no flaming fireballs, no special heals, no resurrection. In this story, there is magic, there is healing spells. But for some reason, no one's a cleric and no one has a resurrection skill or magical ability. So, again, one of those things like, that seems like a plot hole. And of course, for me at least, there was some dissonance between the main character's motivations and how he kind of treats death. And this was one of the things that kind of bugged me throughout the novel a little bit. And I get the fact that it's part of the main character's character arc, and that he has to change and he has to have a particular point of view at the beginning, and it changes over time. But it just one of the things that just kind of bugged me, because the main character cares enough about survival to flee from everybody, so he wants himself to live, and he has survival instincts. But when he's faced with men that are clearly described in the story as being remorseless murderers who have a very clear intent to murder him, that same instinct for self-preservation disappears, and instead he has the presence of mind to whine in the middle of like a fight about not wanting to be a murderer, even though he literally knows that these guys have murdered his friends and plan to murder more of his friends and really are going to murder him. So it's just kind of something that felt conflicting as far as like the main character's motivations versus how he's treating death in the game. So it is what it is. Overall, though, despite some of the issues I have with the story, I actually ended up liking it. The twist and the resolution at the end were actually satisfying enough that it pushed it over the end into like a 7 out of 10 for me. But it was really kind of close. Like, there's a lot of, like I said, I've talked about some of the issues I had the story, and for a good portion of the story, the beginning is nice. The middle section, some of the common things are decent, but again, some of the other issues just kind of brought it down for me a little bit. And but as the story got to its conclusion, like the last quarter of the story, like it really picked up. All the storylines started to come together very well, and the resolution itself was just nice. I'm like, oh, this is, at the end, it kind of won me over. So for me, it gets a score of 7.1 out of 10. That's The Call of Carrethen, a LitRPG and GameLit novel, Wellspring, book number 1, with the score of, again, 7.1 out of 10. So I actually enjoyed it by the end. Okay. On to our next review, which is going to be The Station Core, Dungeon Core Epic, Station Core, book number 1, written by Jonathan Brooks. It is 345 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here is the author's description. Milton Frederick was arguably the best player of crowded legions of Destiny in the entire world. As a strategy coordinator for one of the top guilds, he was beginning to actually make a living from it. That was until he was abducted by aliens. Instead of your stereotypical gray aliens with big black eyes who like to perform anal probes upon unsuspecting victims for unknown reasons, the collective had a more altruistic purpose. Sure, kidnapping 100 humans from Earth, ripping them away from their lives and families, and erasing their memories doesn't sound great, but the way they saw it, the benefits would far outweigh the side effects. Seriously, who wouldn't want their consciences trapped in a station core subject to the whims of a collection of alien races and then ordered to defend themselves against hostile aliens for all eternity? They'd be immortal, so bonus. Unfortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the station core now known as Milton never arrived at his destination. Severely damaged and confused about what happened to him, he woke up to find himself trapped with a massive chicken egg, trapped inside a massive chicken egg on a strange, primitive world filled with curious and deadly creatures. Now, in order to survive the harsh environment, Milton has to rely on a snarky, foul-mouthed AI guide to show him what it means to be a station core. With her help, he might just live long enough to figure out a way to get off the planet, if only he wasn't so afraid of squirrels. And the author does mention that the novel contains foul language that might not be suitable for young readers, and also that it has optional tables, which we'll get into the novel and into the review what that means. So again, 345 pages, $3.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. And again, a warning, folks, there is a lot of cursing in the story. Like, there's a lot. And it's mostly from the Fairy AI guide. And for me, the cursing doesn't really make sense. It's supposed to be an AI created by aliens, but she makes a lot of pop culture references, a lot of nerdy jokes. And she also has the language contextualization to understand which words are curse words. And again, it doesn't make sense to me. And it was one of the things that kind of just bothered me throughout the novel. There is a kind of an explanation, and they're saying that, she was designed to work with the military guys, which is why she curses so much, I guess. But still, small thing. This is a slice of life LitRPG story that tries to do a few new things with the dungeon core genre. Some work, some don't. At least for me. The game mechanics and story have actually really good details. There are detailed character sheets, tables, listing upgrades, list of creatable creatures, and a ton more. However, the author has kind of chosen distinctly to hide a good portion of those details. There are still some in the story, quest notifications but the stat pages with the loads of details and the numbers are all kind of hidden away in the back of the novel as an appendix. So to see them, when you're reading the story, you tap a little appendix note. It takes you to the back of the novel, and then you press another note to go back to the story. It's kind of an awkward system. I do understand the author's desire to kind of balance out things for the different kinds of readers, where he's trying something new in making these tables there in the story, but not really in the story. Like, if you want to see them, great, you can go to the appendix basically. But he's definitely gearing this towards people who maybe feel like those stat tables disrupt the flow of the story, at least visually. And I absolutely get that. For me personally, I felt after I kind of looked at one or two tables, and then I stopped because it was just more steps to enjoy something. It was very awkward to have to tap on the little appendix note, try to memorize the table, and then go back and like understand the references and what things meant. And it's just more awkward than just having it there in the story and just being able to skip over it visually if I wanted to. It didn't work for me, but I do understand the author was trying something new, and I give him full credit for that. It's just I prefer to see those details in the story itself. It's a personal preference, and I get that not everybody has that preference. So, but for me, it just didn't work. There were a few spoilers ahead in the rest of the novel as I described the story structure a little bit. So if you want to hear that, the story gets a 6 out of 10. But I'm going to be speaking a little about a few of the story elements and what worked, what didn't. So there you go. Okay, so going on. The story-wise, the first 10% of the novel actually was a really good setup. Even if it ultimately doesn't matter to the story, by the 60% mark, you have your sentient dungeon core and explanations about how possible progressions for the story, like what it needs to do to survive and etc. And the setup for like it being on this planet. Then there's like this huge swath of the story where the main character builds a primitive dungeon and fends off animals. It's honestly kind of a boring section of the novel. And that's mostly because the dungeon never really felt like it was dangerous, so there's no real tension. And even though there are a few combat scenes, it just didn't work for me. Like you're the main character who's like supposed to be this super all powerful dungeon core made by aliens with an indestructible shell, is fighting essentially different versions, like slightly modified versions of like foxes and squirrels and bears and, lizards and stuff. And I'm like, okay. Like I said, it just didn't work for me. I felt like there wasn't any danger and the opponents and the progression just felt really limited. I honestly, when I was reading this, I nodded off a couple times and I really thought about just like putting the novel down. And I'm really thankful that I didn't, because at the 50% mark and after that, the story got a lot better. Like it really did. It introduces like a sentient race of people. And again, this is the spoiler part a little bit, on that planet. And they have their own culture based upon like fighting monsters and stuff. And I don't want to get too spoilery, but like the story gets a lot more interesting. Like there's more depth of character. There's emotional aspects to the story, but with these sentient people and their races and their own backstories and their own I really do like the world building done with these characters, with these with the sentient race. It was very fascinating. It's very interesting. And I liked how it tied back into the dungeon and it kind of gave the story some purpose. Because before that, I was like, okay, what's the point of this dungeon existing on this world? Like, it doesn't really have to do anything to exist. It can stay safe. And eventually things like that could occur to the main character as well. But once you got past the 50% mark, like the story just got so much better and more deeper. They're very interesting characters, and the storyline just got so much more interesting. And I'm really happy that I didn't put the novel down, because that last half of the story by itself, it could be a standalone novel, or by itself really was good. It really by itself would have got like a 7 out of 10 if it was just it. And it kind of gave a reason for that dungeon to exist in the story again. So for me, that last half of the story, 7 out of 10 very easily. But it's the first half of the story that felt like a drag. And outside of the first introduction section, it got a score of like 5 out of 10. It really was kind of boring, for me at least. So for the overall novel, I'm going to split the difference and give it a 6 out of 10. Like I said, it almost, like I said, it really is almost good. Like the last half of the story by itself, read that part. It's really entertaining. And it makes a ton of sense. There is some things in the first half that you maybe kind of need to get the setup, but there's not a lot, to be honest. So for me, again, that's a score of 6 out of 10. The Station Core, a Dungeon Core Epic Station Core book number 1 with a score of 6 out of 10. Almost good. So there you go. Okay, next we have Warrior Academy, Tournament of Heroes, part number 2, episode number 4. So written by G.L. Rathwig. It is 383 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. The mob hunt is on. The other schools are here and the battles ensue. After the world is destroyed, humanity's survivors start anew. Now in a world forever changed, a place where magic is real and the monsters have come to life, a place where magic and science blend with pop culture. Welcome to Warrior Academy. Welcome back to Warrior Academy. Rejoin Hero and his friends as they continue their journey. Meet new friends and enemies, more food, more fighting, more music. If you like video games, that's the rest of the thing. It's just comparing it to like if you like these pop culture references like Harry Potter, Dragon Ball Z, Dungeons and Dragons, you might have a fun time with this. So there you go. This is episode 4 in the 13 episode series. This is a really easy review for me. The story begins with the epic level boss fight that started at the end of part 1 in this. I'm not sure if it was episode 3 or episode 4, but part 1 in the book right before this. It continues on the mob hunt and the tournament, and there are a couple of other like flashback storylines, which actually make really good breaks in the almost non-stop action on the mob hunt and in the tournament side. So this is a very actiony episode into this series. Like, it's probably the most actiony of them all, because it literally does start off with like this huge epic battle scene between like headmasters of the school and like the big bad boss of the end of the last book. And it just continues on with that action for like the first, I don't know, it's like 60% of the novel. So a lot of good stuff there. My absolute favorite part of the novel, however, is one that does a tournament style fight, but not with like fisticuffs or swords or anything. It's actually I'm not probably not gonna say that's right. A Shogekyu. If you've seen the anime Food Wars, you will know what that is. It's a very entertaining anime, and I like the fact that the author is always willing to pull from cultural references in animes and other pop culture references. He's never afraid to like incorporate their themes. And there's a really good Shogekyu fight scene, I guess you could call it. But it was really fun, very interesting way of including a different kind of tournament style system. I really liked the part the best, and I was really hungry after reading it. So enjoyable all the way around. The novel, of course, has its trademark pop culture references and humor. So if you've liked the author's other entries in the series, you're going to like this one as well. And of course, there's also a playlist that provides theme music for each and every chapter. It's one of the other unique things about the series that I always find super enjoyable. And I'm not really a music person, but I always appreciate when an author tries to incorporate different things into their series, whether it's different game mechanics or in this case, a soundtrack to his novel. My two favorite songs on the soundtrack for this particular novel are, and these are new songs to me, At Your Funeral by Saves the Day and Banana Pancakes by Jack Johnson. So good stuff all around, especially if you like the series. And this is one of those unique series where you either really like it or you don't. And there's not really much wiggle room in between. So if you're into the like episode 4, it's still a good series, really enjoyable. So continue reading it. I encourage you. It gets a score 7.4 out of 10 for me. Warrior Academy, A Tournament of Heroes, part number 2, episode 4, with scores 7.4 out of 10. Like, you'll read book 1 and you'll know whether you like it or not, really. But this one's equally as good as the rest before it. Okay, on to our fourth review, Regicide, the Completionist Chronicles, book number 2, written by Dakota Kraut. It is 331 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. The second installment of Dakota Kraut's best-selling Completionist Chronicle series. After the encounter at the Mage's College, Joe's name has become well known in Eternia. While the majority of his... Wait, I just realized, Eternia? Really, buddy? You named it after a He-Man? I'm just saying. Okay, sorry. While the majority of his guild is ecstatic over the bonuses he brings them, not everyone is pleased with his rising influence. In fact, someone has been spreading rumors that Joe is unbalanced, sacrificing comrades for personal power. As a result, Joe is forced to recruit a team of misfits and discovers that their unique abilities complement his own. With their assistance, Joe moves forward with his plans to specialize into a more powerful version of his ritualist class. But when the dust settles, he'll be forced to ask himself a simple question. Was it his actions that lit the fires of war? So there you go. Full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased the novel when it became available. This is a great novel. It really is. It starts out kind of slice of life, but gets more purposeful in the second act. Joe, the main character, puts together a new team of quirky players. His guild gets handed a complicated task that doesn't go as planned. And of course, the main character, Joe, still has to make time to study and experiment with magic and rituals. In addition to the really good action scenes in the story, there's good adventure scenes, there's good adventure quests, and I really like the crafting and magical research elements. Like those to me, like those two parts, the crafting and magical research, are probably my favorite parts of the story. And that's mostly because it's something that differentiates this series from other LitRPG novels. Like lots of stories have a little bit of crafting or maybe a tiny bit of magical research, but they mostly focus on action and adventure, which is perfectly fine. But this novel definitely devotes a lot of detailed quality time with crafting and magical research. And it gives it a depth of understanding in those game mechanics in that system that I personally just really, really enjoy. And I think the author does a really good job of balancing these elements being detailed, but not being monotonous or stuffy. And I think that's really hard for people to do. So he even makes something as simple as like scroll making. He breaks it into pieces that are understandable and that'll still allow for like logical progression in the story, especially with like the notifications and the actual RPG mechanics. It all makes really good sense, and it never gets to be too much, at least for me. Like, I really enjoy that aspect of it. There's no magic button pressing in any respect. The main character has to work for anything he learns, and sometimes things don't work out the way he wants to, but he still, makes the best of it. So I like that progression, that concept and story, that the main character has to work super hard. Even if he has like a clear advantage as far as like his class goes, he still has to work really, really hard, and it's time consuming to see the benefits of those advantages. So it's a good balance for me. The game mechanics and story, as I talked about in the first review of the novel, it's super detailed, very interesting. Like I said, I really did enjoy how the main character's character progression in the story went. I'm not going to spoil things for you, but I really love the specialization that the ritualist went through, and that's something the author talks about in the novel description, so it's not spoilery, but really fun potentiality for this particular class that I really enjoyed. There are a few rough spots in the story, these, especially when it comes to like the social dynamics of the new group. I basically feel like they got a little too chummy too quickly. Like, I think this, the entirety of the novel only is like a couple weeks long, and this new pickup group, essentially, they got too close too quickly for me. And I'm not saying it's poorly written. I think it's just like, oh, that level of comfort just seems like it should have taken longer. Like I said, small quibble, and honestly, that's the only thing I can kind of find to even remotely complain about the novel, which tells you just how good the story is, at least for me. If that's the only thing I could see, like, oh, that could have tweaked a little bit. Overall, like I said, it's a great read, especially if you like punny humor, which I do. You'll find many things to bear with in the story. I found myself liking book number 2 in the series even more than I did book 1. And so I can't wait for book 3. This novel gets a score of 8 out of 10. It's genuinely great. And like I said, it has all the things I like about book 1. But in this case, it feels a little more purposeful than book 1 did, which is why, for me at least, it is an improvement in both storytelling and also in focus and in some of the elements that I really enjoyed. So good stuff here all around. Good score of 8 out of 10. That's Regicide, the Completionist Chronicles, book number 2, with a score of 8 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to our 5th review, War Aeternus, book number 3, The Culling, which has some really great cover art. Written by Charles Dean. This is 428 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Struggling to recover from his losses in Kirsten, Lee is swept back into the fray when a dangerous new herald sets her sights on him. Hell-bent on reshaping the world in her own image and with her own ideals, she is willing to commit even the most immoral acts in her pursuit of righteousness. At a risk of losing everything he has worked so hard to create, Lee has to find a way to defend the weak against a mad woman whose deranged sense of justice has twisted the limits of the game. To make matters even more difficult, Lee is forced to face these problems while dealing with an increasingly erratic system he doesn't understand, and the goddess of blood's own strong-willed herald. So there you go. Good description. Full disclosure, I received an advance copy of the novel review and actually did some light beta reading for the author on the novel. I purchased it when it became available. So like the light beta reading for me is basically, I looked over the game mechanics, pointed out any inconsistencies, gave a few opinions about a few topics, but it's, like I said, it is what it is. So just full disclosure. This series, actually, this is a really nice. I enjoyed every single novel in this series, and I like most of what the author writes in general. This particular series, though, I think it does a few things that I really enjoy. One, the game mechanics are always really solid. The action is always visceral, and the plots are interesting, and they're never simple. Like, the author usually has almost some like really intense subplots here. Like, he actually has like concepts in that are more than just kill a bad guy, beat him up. You know what I mean? Like, the author usually has like some really interesting, I'm going to say points of views, but he discusses some interesting themes in each one of these novels. And this one is no different. Like, I think a few of the themes might upset some people, but to me, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because whenever an author can make you think about something, I think that's a good thing. And that's something that I think Charles Dean does really well with his stories. And of course, they're always enjoyable to read, of course. Each book in the series has also done a really good job with character development. And this one is no different. Like honestly, I've talked to the author a few times about his stories, and he's planned these things out in advance. Like in book number 1, he had a character arc that he fulfilled. Book number 2, he character arc, and each arc is leading to a particular point in this series. And for me, that's something that takes some skill that I just don't have personally, but it's really nice to see how it all comes together as you continue reading these stories. In this particular novel, the main character kind of gets pushed harder by a villain than he has in any of the other stories in the past, and it was very interesting to see just how far the main character was willing to go in this novel to win. The main character is definitely shifting a bit towards the dark side, and there are definitely some dark places in this novel. And I'm kind of curious to see if he's going to go full on Sith in this series at some point, like he'll become the villain or something. I don't know that it's the case or not. I have no foreknowledge or anything. I'm a fan. I'm a reader, and I'm just kind of curious to see if that's where it goes in the story, because it kind of seems like it might be turning in that direction. Now, even though the main character lost some people in the last novel, some new interesting characters have been introduced in this one that kind of have become fan favorite. I think they're going to become fan favorite. I should say they're definitely my favorite characters in the story at some point. Especially the Goddess of Blood's Herald that you introduce. It's a super fun character, and I think it's a great balancing act between some of the darker moments in the story. This character really creates some light, funny, interesting stuff. And I think it's a good balancing act for that, for the story in general. But it's definitely one of my favorite characters in the novel. I think it might be my favorite character. So it is what it is, but it's a nice balancing point. Overall, one of the few things I think could have been developed a little better in this particular story is the villain. She's a doer of bad things, and some people are generally going to hate her for just the philosophy she espouses. There's a hint in the name of the novel, The Culling. But personally, I just didn't hate her. I didn't also empathize with her really sad backstory. For me, it was just like, oh, that's like, it was not a bad villain. Well, I mean, it's a bad villain. She does bad things, but like a really super good villain for me, at least, is one that you either just hate with the passion and you're happy to see make a fall, or it's one that you can almost like see with their point of view, one that you can like, oh, I kind of understand why they're doing evil things, because you think of Thanos, of like from the Infinity Wars movies, like at some point in the novel it becomes a much more fuller character because you can see his point of view, like he's trying to do a thing and he's not just being evil for evil's sake. And for me in this novel, that never really happened. And next, not to say it's a poorly written villain, very villainy, very doer of bad things. It's just, I think that could have been developed a little bit better, at least for me. I'm sure other people are going to be perfectly satisfied with the novel and this villain. I do like the fact that this particular villain does push the main character, though, towards the dark side. I think that allows for some potentially very interesting stories. Okay, overall, though, had a good time with the story. I enjoyed reading it. Some of the twists in the story were genuinely unexpected, and I liked the addition of new town building mechanics to the story. That's a new addition to the game mechanics side of it. Everything else in the novel, there's still good crafting, there's still good storytelling, there's still good adventure and action galore. Overall, had a really good time with it. Gets a score of 7.7 out of 10. That's War of Aeternus. The Culling with a score of 7.7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, next is Life Reset. EVP, or Environment versus Player, New Era Online, book number 2, written by Shimmer Kuznets. Okay, it's 794 pages, which is a huge novel. It's $4.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited, though. So, honestly, the per page count, that's like less than a penny. It's like half a penny a page. And so page count wise for the price, very, very nicely priced. But again, it's not in Kindle Unlimited. I think that's because the author also has some of his work online, like at the Royal Road or some other places. So here's the author's description. After defeating the Hobgoblin threat, Orin is now faced with an even more tenacious enemy, the players themselves. His old guild has discovered the village's location and a deadly strike force is closing in. With time running out, Orin must build up his clan and recruit an army of monsters if he's to have any hope of withstanding the coming attack. So there we go. Very short description. Does a really good job of like summarizing things though. Most of the story is still very slice of life. So if you like that aspect of book 1 that continues on with the novel, with the main character switching between like town building, level grinding, and crafting. I personally love these aspects of the story. They're my favorite parts of it. I love those parts, and it still has all those things that I enjoyed from book 1 in book 2. The author didn't cut them down. In addition to those aspects of the novel, introduces a couple new elements. One, new beta players join the Goblin Village and they get their own adventures. I actually like that. 2, there's kind of a mystery whodunit subplot where the main character tries to track down a saboteur. Both are really good allied elements. They help to break up the longer chunks of crafting and town building, which they said I think this is an improvement in storytelling and pacing, because one of the few things that I think book 1 did was that it had really good crafting and like town building stuff, but they went on a little long sometimes. And in this novel, these like 2 little subplots were very well interspersed, and they kind of broke those huge sections up. So I think that was a really good added element to the story. The last 25% of the novel was honestly good enough on its own that it could be a standalone novel. It was really entertaining. There's a full plot arc there. There's lots of purposeful action and a great story climax. So good job on that as well. Overall, the story maintains all the elements I enjoyed from book 1. It refines them and even adds in some new interesting ones. It took me a while to finish this novel. Like, it really did take me several days. I think it took me 3 days to finish this. But I had a great time reading it all the way through. So for me, it gets a score of 8 out of 10. That's Life Reset, EVP, Environment versus Player, New Era Line, book number 2, with the score of 8 out of 10. So good job. That's it. We're done. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for listening, for watching. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Patreon, on our webpage. Simple way to support the podcast is just to share the show. Like, if you see it on Facebook, share that, do a share and show it to all your friends that this thing you love, LitRPG. And of course, also remember, when you go buy these books, if you lose the links we have in our show notes, we actually get a couple pennies whenever you buy something for that novel on Amazon, and those pennies all add up. They help support this podcast. This podcast is ad-free. You guys, the viewers, are essentially helping to support it when you click on those links to purchase these novels. So thank you very much for supporting us, folks. And of course, if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. So thanks again, folks, for hanging out with me today. And until we can hang out again, ladies and gentlemen, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.